Hey mystery lovers. I'm just here to haunt you with some creepy stories that'll send chills down your spine. Before we start, hit subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's get started. Addiction took my mom slowly, like it was cradling her, rocking her through it. It sang her to sleep every night, sunk deep into the mattress on her bed. I remember when her back teeth started falling out, she left them on the side of the bathtub, like it didn't even matter. I was 7. I took them, hid them in a matchbox, and kept them safe. I thought, maybe, just maybe, if I held on to all her missing pieces, we could put her back together one day. Our house was falling apart around us, and we were just kids trying to raise ourselves. The ceilings had water stains that looked like bruises, the bottom steps creaked and had dry rot, and in winter, the radiators would leak rusty water that stained everything. But it was ours, you know? And Annie, my sister, she made it feel like a home, even when it shouldn't have. Annie practically became my mom. She'd patch me up with lopsided band-aids when I'd scrape my knees and heat up microwave dinners that were always just warm in the middle. She told me ghost stories before bed, and when I got too scared to sleep alone, she'd let me crawl into her bed without a word. Annie taught me how to dance in the living room, barefoot on that scratchy old carpet, with the music channel blasting on the TV. She always made sure I got the hot water when we showered, even though it meant she had to deal with freezing cold. She used to brush my hair every morning before school, no matter how much I screamed or flailed when she hit a knot. Annie had dark hair, like her dad, whoever he was, but I was blonde, like Mom. I think Annie always wanted to be blonde, too. She dyed her hair once, hoping maybe Mom would see less of him in her and more of herself. She idolized Marilyn Monroe, thought looking like her would make her and Mom closer. God, I'd give anything to have Annie's hands brushing my hair again, even if it hurt. She moved to New York when I turned 18, and she never came back. I still dream about her sometimes, her laugh, her perfume, the way she'd hum when she was busy. Keeping up with Mom, though? That was impossible. We learned early on that no matter how much we tried, she was always going to leave us behind. That didn't make it any easier. When she was drinking light, she was radiant. She'd wake us up at 3 a.m. with pancakes drenched in cherry syrup, laughing like the world wasn't so bad after all. And sometimes, when the weather was just right, she'd call our school and lie, tell them we'd caught some made-up summer sickness, and we'd drive to the beach instead. I still remember being 9, riding home after one of those ocean days, licking the salt from my fingers. Annie had just dyed her hair blonde, her best friend Jane helping her over the kitchen sink. I sat in the back seat, watching Mom and Annie in the front. With the windows down and the music blasting, for a second, I couldn't tell who was the mother and who was the daughter, but when Mom drank heavy, it was like she disappeared into someone else. She'd dress up, her hair piled high like a beauty queen, eyes smeared with glitter and black eyeliner, and she'd be gone all night. Sometimes, she'd be gone for days. No warning, no goodbye, just a post-it note stuck to the fridge with her lipstick kiss stamped on it, promising she'd be back soon. When she did come home, she didn't always come alone. The kitchen table would be buried under beer cans and ashtrays, smoke filling the room until we could barely breathe. Mom would laugh in the middle of it all, like it didn't matter that the ceiling was turning yellow. Annie and I would put pillows over our heads at night, pretending we couldn't hear the noise, couldn't feel the house shaking. It wasn't easy, growing up like that. But Annie made it bearable. She was my anchor when the world felt like it was spinning out of control. And even though she's gone now, I still hold on to her, just like I held on to Mom's teeth in that matchbox, hoping someday, somehow, I could piece it all back together. When Mom wasn't drinking enough, though, that was worse. She'd unravel, piece by piece. The fridge would go empty. No food, not even milk for cereal. She'd chain smoke constantly, and the burns from her cigarettes left little black marks on the wallpaper by the stairs, like the walls were rotting along with everything else. She barely slept, and when she did, it was this restless kind of pacing, half moons under her eyes, knuckles raw from God knows what. And the slightest thing would set her off. I'll never forget the time I spilled juice on the couch. It was just a glass of juice, nothing major, right? But she looked at me with this dead, hollow stare, dragged me off the couch onto the carpet, and then she just lost it. She ripped every cushion off that couch, carried them outside, and set them on fire in the backyard. No yelling, no theatrics, just that quiet, terrifying kind of anger. Annie watched from the window for a while. Then she came and sat next to me, right there on the floor, our backs pressed against the empty couch frame. She rested her head on my shoulder, in that little hollow between my collarbones. We didn't say a word. But when Mom drank too much, that was another kind of nightmare. She'd laugh, too loud, too long, at absolutely nothing, like the sound of her own voice was the joke. Then, like clockwork, she'd start crying, tears streaming down her face and landing in her cereal at breakfast. Annie would shut down completely when Mom was like that. She'd retreat into herself, disappear into this place where no one could touch her. She'd stay up all night watching old black and white movies, whispering the lines like prayers. She knew them all by heart. I don't think she even cared about the movies, it was just something to keep her grounded. When I was little, 5 years old, maybe, I used to cry when I'd find Mom passed out on her bed. I was so sure she wasn't going to wake up. Annie would hold me, wipe my tears, and tell me Mom was just sleeping, like in those princess stories I loved. She'd sit on the bed with me, the both of us just waiting for Mom to wake up, like it was normal. But as we got older, the roles shifted. I'd be the one to pick Mom up off the bathroom floor, over and over, while Annie would clean her up. She'd smooth Mom's hair back, wipe the vomit from her mouth, and change her clothes if she'd pissed herself. Watching Annie in those moments, it was clear, she wasn't just my sister anymore. She was the mom now. And somehow, she never complained. Not once. When I was little, 5 years old, maybe, I used to cry when I'd find Mom passed out on her bed. I was so sure she wasn't going to wake up. Annie would hold me, wipe my tears, and tell me Mom was just sleeping, like in those princess stories I loved. She'd sit on the bed with me, the both of us just waiting for Mom to wake up, like it was normal. But as we got older, the roles shifted. I'd be the one to pick Mom up off the bathroom floor, over and over, while Annie would clean her up. She'd smooth Mom's hair back, wipe the vomit from her mouth, and change her clothes if she'd pissed herself. Watching Annie in those moments, it was clear, she wasn't just my sister anymore. She was the mom now. And somehow, she never complained. Not once. It was October. I was 13. Annie was 16, and it was a Wednesday night. Mom had been gone for 2 days. She called that morning from a payphone. Her voice was slurred, like it always was when she drank too much, and she told us she was having the time of her life with her new friends. She said she hoped we were doing fine. Then she asked me if I was having a good birthday. I hung up on her. My birthday was the day before. Annie, as always, had been the one to step in. She gave me a pile of presents, strawberry lip gloss, glittery nail polish, and things that felt too big for her to give me, even then. I didn't ask where she got the money. I didn't care. We took the bus to the beach with her best friend, Jane, and ate the birthday cake Annie baked. It was lopsided, and the sand from the beach got into the frosting, but it tasted like the sea and sweetness all rolled into one. I remember savoring every bite, the sugar scraping against my teeth, while the sun sank into the water. Annie snapped grainy photos on her Nokia as I blew out the candles. I kept wishing, over and over, that Mom wouldn't come home. That maybe this time, she'd stay gone. But by Wednesday night, Annie and I weren't speaking. The house felt heavy, anger seeping between the floorboards, into the air. It started small. She tripped at the bottom of the stairs, and we both laughed. She threw her head back, and her gap-toothed smile caught the light. I reached down to pick her up, felt her breath warm against my cheek, but that's when I smelled it, whiskey. I froze. I couldn't pick her up too. Not Annie. I couldn't watch her fall again and again, the way Mom had, because I knew, once she started, she wouldn't stop. I just let go. She fell back onto the floor, laughing, her blonde hair spilling over her eyes. And when I looked down at her, all I could see was Mom. I ran. My feet pounded the hallway, each step like a heartbeat breaking loose. I ran into the kitchen and grabbed every bottle we had, tipping them down the sink. The whiskey, the vodka, it all went. Annie fought me. She shoved me back, her fingers catching the liquor as it poured. When I grabbed the last bottle, she grabbed me. She made me drop it, and it smashed between us on the floor, the glass shards scattering like stars, pieces of light we'd never be able to put back. Outside, the sky was turning pale gold, clouds smeared with pink and cream, like the kind of sunrise that should have belonged to a better day. I started crying, right there, and Annie? Annie dropped to her knees and started picking up the pieces. That was who she was. She was always trying to fix things, even when it was way too late. Later, the smell of food dragged me out of my room. My stomach betrayed me. I was starving, and there was Annie, cooking pasta, real food, not microwave leftovers. She'd set the table, Dammy Wynette playing softly on the CD player, swaying her hips like nothing had happened. As we ate, I forgave her a little more with every bite. Mom never cooked. She never remembered that spaghetti was my favorite, not since I was a kid, and she never stayed sober long enough to sit at a table. Annie wasn't Mom. We were washing dishes when we heard it. At first, it was faint, just a soft sound coming from the backyard, crying. I figured it was Mika, the 2-year-old next door, having one of his tantrums. Or maybe Lucky Strike, that stray cat from down the street, begging for food. I always wanted to feed him when he came by, curling around my ankles, but Annie would stop me every time. Once you start giving, she'd say, they never stop taking. Looking back, I'm not sure she was talking about the cat. Later, we sat outside on the porch, under the Christmas lights Annie had strung up. It was a game we used to play as kids, pointing to the stars and making up stories about them. Ah, yes, Annie said, gesturing to a cluster of lights. That one's the Coors light. God dropped it out of his convertible window and just never picked it up. I laughed. Of course. Right next to the ashtray, left there by angels on a smoke break. She grinned, nodding sagely. They say if you wish on it, all your dreams come true. We laughed. Then Annie got quiet, her face tilted toward the sky. Let's wish, Emmy. Let's wish. So we did. Then we heard the crying again. It was closer this time. It sounded human. I stood, squinting into the dark. Must be Mika, I said. Maybe he wandered around the back. Do you want to call Connie, tell her we'll bring him over? Annie didn't answer. I sighed. Fine, I guess I'll do everything. I stepped off the porch, the grass soft and damp under my heels. The air smelled like rain, fresh, clean, promising, but unfulfilled. Annie's voice stopped me in my tracks. It was strained, almost scared. I turned, smiling. The smile died when I saw her face. She whispered, get inside. Now. Her eyes weren't on me. They were on the bushes by the fence. I followed her gaze. Someone was crouching there. Knees tucked up, arms wrapped around their legs. Their mouth opened and closed, like they were crying. Like a child. No. Not like a child. More like someone pretending. Then they stood, spine snapping upright. They were tall, too tall, and impossibly thin. My body moved before my mind could, panic propelling me forward. I grabbed Annie, dragged her inside, slammed the door, locked it, and prayed. Don't turn around, Emmy, Annie said, grabbing my face. Don't look. Something smashed against the window. Glass shattered. We ran upstairs, skipping the rotted steps, locking ourselves in the bathroom. The crying followed us, but it wasn't crying anymore. It was laughter. Shrill, mocking laughter. They are looking for us, Annie whispered. She handed me a knife. I shook my head, but she pressed it into my hands, her thumb pushing so hard against the blade that it bled. I'm going to get the phone, she said. Promise me you won't open the door. Not for me. Not for anyone. I didn't want to promise. But I did. She left. And then I heard her voice. She called through the door. It's okay. Let me in. It wasn't her. And I knew, whatever was out there, it wasn't human. And that's it for today's story. But you know, the mysteries we uncover? They never really end, they linger, don't they? Waiting. Hiding. In the shadows. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, go ahead, hit subscribe, because trust me, you don't want to miss the next tale, the one that might just keep you up at night. Until then, stay curious, stay cautious, and hey, never stop questioning the world around you. See you in the next one.